Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Tidbits. My name is Kristina Koopman. Thank you for joining me. Today's episode, I'm going to throw around a $5 word here. We are going to explore dialectical analysis of art history. Don't freak out. It sounds complicated, but I'm going to wager that it's something you probably already do. So let's explore it a little further. If we can define a work of art as a unique human creation that communicates visually, then there is no single approach to looking at art that would be appropriate for every single piece of artwork out there. It's important to always ask ourselves how a work of art or a group of works might relate to developments in society, religion, or culture of a particular period. Why was this work of art created at this particular moment in this particular place? How did this work function in its daily societal setting? For example, Egyptian art was 100% functional, while arts and craft furniture was more aesthetic forward. Who paid for this work of art? And why was this person or group willing to support its creation and display? Questions like these are important to think about, even when the answers aren't immediately obvious. This is dialectic analysis, looking at real-world conditions that influence art and culture. Specific for today, we're going to talk about how the invention of the printing press had a profound impact on global culture. It enabled the transmission and communication of ideas through the printed word and printed image. Artists could share their work with 100 times as many people, as well as each other, and reach a far wider audience than was previously possible. Artists were no longer dependent on the church or wealthy patrons to commission one-off paintings that would only be held in private residences. Artists could make their own money, selling prints directly to a wider audience. It became even more pronounced with the growth of a middle class. Increased global trade and the shrinking of the world meant a developing middle class that had more disposable income and more free time. These factors, all coming together, of course, influence the world, but they also influence art. Let's take another deeper look. One quick vocab term before we get started. I apologize for my Japanese pronunciation in the rest of this video. The vocab term is ukiyo-e, which translates literally to images of the floating world. It's a genre of Japanese art which flourished from the 17th through the 19th centuries. Its artists produced woodblock prints and paintings of such objects as female beauties, kabuki actors, sumo wrestlers, scenes from art history and folk tales, travel scenes, flora, fauna. Think of it as Japanese pop art for the 1800s. We're going to explore a specific work of art with this and talk about how Japanese printmaking revolutionized the entire art world. Printmaking developed in Japan during the peaceful Edo period, which lasted from 1615 until the middle of the 19th century. The usual method was woodblock printing. Representing scenes from everyday life, artists of the Edo period elevated the technique of woodblock printing to a pinnacle of Japanese artistic achievement. These prints were later to exert a profound influence on artists in the West. Favored subjects in the 18th century were those called ukiyo-e. This refers to the transient pleasures of everyday life, described at that time as, quote, living only for the moment, singing songs, drinking wine, and diverting ourselves by just floating, end quote. These pleasures were to be found most easily in the bustling cities of Edo, now Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, and in tea houses, theaters, and brothels across Japan. The rise of kabuki, Japan's popular style of theater, led to a craze for prints of actors and scenes from the latest plays. Japanese prints began filtering through to the West in the 1850s, when the country's cultural isolation was broken. And by the following decade, there were specialist shops in Paris selling exotic Japanese wares. Claude Monet bought his first print in 1856, and his enthusiasm was shared by other prominent artists such as Edgar Degas, James Whistler, Edouard Manet, Mary Cassatt, and many others. Vincent van Gogh once said, quote, "I envy the clarity of the Japanese. Their work is as simple as breathing. They do a figure in a few sure strokes with the same ease as buttoning your coat." This is the Great Wave off Kanagawa, also known as the Great Wave or just the Wave, a woodblock print by Japanese artist Katsushika Hokusai, known as just Hokusai. It was published sometime between 1829 and 1833 in the late Edo period, as the first print in Hokusai's series 36 Views of Mount Fuji. The image depicts an enormous wave threatening 3 boats off the coast in the Sagami Bay, while Mount Fuji rises in the background. It is Hokusai's most famous work, and is often considered the most recognizable work of Japanese art in the world. The print is a yoko-e, that is, a landscape, produced to the size of an oben, about 10 inches high by 15 inches wide. The composition comprises 3 main elements: the sea whipped up by a storm, 3 boats, and a mountain. It includes the signature of the artist in the upper left-hand corner. The mountain with a snow-capped peak is Mount Fuji, which in Japan is considered sacred and a symbol of national identity. Mount Fuji is an iconic figure in many Japanese representations of famous places. In the scene, there are 3 oshiokuribuni, vast boats that are used to transport live fish from the Izu Peninsula to the market of the Bay of Edo. As the name of the piece indicates, the boats are in Kanagawa Prefecture, with Tokyo to the north. The boats, oriented to the southeast, are returning to the capital. If we look closely, we can see that there are 8 rowers per boat, clinging to their oars. There are 2 more passengers in the front of each boat, bringing the total number of human figures in the image to 30. The sea dominates the composition as an extending wave about to break. In the moment captured in this image, the wave forms a circle around the center of the design, framing Mount Fuji in the background. From writer Edouard de Goncourt, quote, "The drawing of the wave is a deification of the sea, made by a painter who lived with the religious terror of the overwhelming ocean completely surrounding his country. He is impressed by the sudden fury of the ocean's leap toward the sky, by the deep blue of the inner side of the curve, by the splash of its claw-like crest as it sprays forth droplets. The waves form a frame through which we see the mountain. The gigantic wave is a yin-yang of empty space beneath the mountain. The inevitable breaking that we await creates a tension in the picture. In the foreground, a small wave, forming a miniature Fuji, is reflected by the distant mountain, itself shrunk in perspective. The little wave is larger than the mountain. The small fishermen cling to thin fishing boats, slide on a seamount looking to dodge the wave. The violent yang of nature is overcome by the yin of the confidence of these experienced fishermen." End quote. Hokusai created the monumental 36 Views of Mount Fuji series, both as a response to a domestic travel boom in Japan and as a part of a personal obsession with Mount Fuji. It was this series, specifically the Great Wave off Kanagawa, that secured his fame both in Japan and overseas. While Hokusai's work prior to this series is certainly important, it was not until this series that he gained broad recognition. It should be pointed out that he created this series when he was just shy of 70 years old. This print is one of the most reproduced and most instantly recognized artworks in the world. You can purchase cell phone cases, umbrellas, socks, t-shirts, coffee mugs, really anything with this image on it. With its ubiquitous presence in pop culture, this image often gets taken for granted when we see it. I'm not kidding when I say I have a print of this piece hanging in my bathroom right now. I see it every morning and every night. Until this video, however, I'm not sure I ever noticed how many fishermen were in the boats, or noticed how the small wave overpowers the great mountain. Groundbreaking advancements in technology and massive changes in international politics and isolation all led to this print hanging in my bathroom. From the creation of printing presses to the development of blue pigments, the expanding international trade and commerce, fashionable art collecting in France, and the Met's gift shop. These are all outside factors in culture, history, and society that have played a role in art history. It's all connected, and the analysis just adds another layer of interest to this beautiful work of art.